This is WPSL Port St. Lucie, the talk of the Treasure Coast.
It's 11:07 at WPSL 1590, the talk of the Treasure Coast, and you're on Ask a Rabbi.
And this is Rabbi Shafir Lobb of Congregation Eitz Chayim, your Jewish home on the Treasure Coast. So welcome everybody on this beautiful Friday morning. It is another beautiful Friday morning.
Humidity's less. Nice.
Yeah, it was nice. It was very nice. So
Yeah, nice for a change.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so how was your week?
My week was relatively quiet, which is nice.
That's a change.
Yes. Well, we are into officially now Mar Cheshvan. Mar is poor or bitter. Cheshvan, the month of Cheshvan, which is the only month in the Jewish calendar that doesn't have a holiday other than Shabbat. So, it's the rabbi's chance to catch their breath.
There you go.
Yeah. I don't know any rabbi who calls it sad or bitter. Most of us call it trying to get caught up and start to do some of the things that we've needed to do for a long time but haven't been able to do. Thank you to the small amount of holidays in the Hebrew month of Tishrei. So, yeah.
Get some rest.
Absolutely. It's something that I need and want, and lots of other things going on. So I am teaching at both IRSC and Kaiser, enjoying my students immensely, and they help keep me vibrant. I will say they teach me as much as I teach them.
I hear that from profs all the time.
Yeah. They do, because they have a different way of looking at the things that are going on. They bring new insights. They bring interesting questions. So a funny story out of the past, and this had to do with part of why I went back to school and got an engineering degree when I was a flight instructor. Because among other things, I had a lot of trouble explaining the aerodynamics. I didn't understand them quite well enough. And the flying textbooks do not do a good enough job. At least they didn't do that. I don't know. It's been decades since I've been in flight school. But even the best flying teaching textbooks were more about the mechanics of, control the airplane by doing this and it'll do that. But they didn't explain the whys and how the aerodynamics work. And I guess I'm the kind of learner that needs to understand what's going on or have some feel for what's happening physically, the physics of it. And the books didn't give that. They gave a set of instructions, and it was kind of a mechanical way of flying as opposed to an integral way of flying. And so I'm a more whole kind of learner and teacher. Everybody's got a different kind of learning style, or a different set of learning styles where they learn best. And I learn best if I understand more of the bigger picture. And so I couldn't explain a lot of things when students would ask me the why questions. The one that was fairly and I've got the answers now, but I didn't have it then. But if you fly behind an airplane, now if you fly behind a small airplane, there is still something called wake turbulence, but unless you're a butterfly, you're probably not going to be bothered by it. And what that is the air coming up from the bottom of the wing trying to get to the top, because the top of the wing has lower pressure. So air from the bottom, which is higher, which is what's lifting the airplane, is the difference in air pressure between the bottom and the top of the airfoil. And so the air is trying to come up, and that creates a vortex, kind of like the thing that goes down your drain, the spiral of fluid.
It's like a wake.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's an air wake.
Yeah.
It's the wake in the air.
That.
And, the same way that it forms behind ships.
Yeah, that's like if you're in a dinghy or something and you don't want to get behind a huge cabin cruiser.
Right, because
It's
you're
going
going
to
to
it's going to get very uncomfortable.
It's going to get choppy. And the
To say
same
the
is
least.
true behind airplanes. It's a function of how heavy the aircraft is. Right?
Dare I even ask what it's like to even be in close proximity to a 747?
If you get in a 747's wake turbulence and you're in a light airplane, you better be prepared to do aerobatics.
It's that bad, huh?
It's
I
it's
can't.
that impressive, yeah.
I can't even imagine that.
You know, one of the ways that little airplanes get in trouble when they go to the big airports is getting too close to some of the other aircraft and not realizing how big and how powerful. But wake turbulence, when it comes off of the wings, actually sinks. It sinks about 1,000 feet a minute.
Oh.
And I was teaching ground school. I frequently taught the ground school in Ohio when I lived there. And I had, I want to say 15 students, adults learning how to fly, and they have to pass the written test. And I'm also just going through the dynamics and everything about flying, because it's better to learn it on the ground than pay for it in the airplane. It's much more cost effective for everybody. And I was explaining this wake turbulence, not even as well as I'm explaining it here, but using the textbook explanation of it. And somebody says to me, "Why does wake turbulence sink?" And my husband, who was not yet my husband at the time, was in that class. And he later told me that the look on my face was absolutely classic. And if we had had smartphones, he'd have been snapping a picture of it. Okay? He'd have been snapping a picture because he said it was that good. It was a classic look of,
Certainly.
and not liking to be in because no teacher likes to not know the answer. We get there often, and that is part of why our students teach us, because we then go, because we don't like that, so we'll then go and research it and learn about it and be more informed and better able to answer. And that actually is part of what led me back to going back to school.
I have a dear friend who runs one of the radio networks, and he's been a pilot for a while, but he's studying for his instrument rating.
Mm-hmm.
And the instructor in Ohio told him, let's do another week of study prep, for the exam. He said, remember, you only make one mistake in the air. And so that got Josh's attention, to say the least.
Yeah, that's how I met my husband. He was coming for his instrument rating.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. That's fun.
Yeah, he was a member at a flight club, and they could do all of the visual licensing, but they couldn't do the instrument licensing. That's a special set of certifications on the instructor's part. And, yeah. And I will say this, though, that if you learn to fly in Ohio, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, what's called the Great Lakes Triangle, then you will not have problems with low visibility anywhere.
Oh, I kind of beg to differ. Maybe California and Tule fog in the Central Valley.
So here's the story of that. Somebody was flying from Ohio into California, and they were coming through the pass. There's a couple of passes where little airplanes have to come through because you can't get over the tallest mountains in a little airplane.
Oh, yeah, right.
And so he's coming through the pass, and the controller on the other side of the mountain says to him, be advised, visibility is only 3 miles on the west side of the mountain pass. And the pilot responds with, well, I'm flying from Ohio. And the controller said, you won't have any problems.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the fog is that bad. It's not smog, but it's fog. The mountains in Ohio, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia hold enough moisture that fog is impressive and visibility is often low. Or light snow showers are just so much fun. I am so glad not to be dealing with snow.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Rain is a pain, but you don't have to shovel it.
So what did you do with your snow shovel? You left it in Tucson,
I left it
right?
in Ohio.
You left it in Ohio.
Actually, I did. There's a funny story associated with that. When I first moved to Tucson, we had the rabbis there did the rabbis and the Federation worked hand in hand a lot more than they do in this region. This is just a lot more sparse. But one of the things that I did almost immediately was participate in something called the Shuk. And Shuk means market, but in Tucson the Shuk is an academic Shuk. So it's all of the rabbis and some of the primary teachers in the area get together and offer 2 sessions of the same class. So they'll offer an hour and a half and then a break in an hour and a half. And it's done I want to say it's probably a Sunday evening, but I'm not sure. Most likely it was a Sunday or a weekday. But you do this 2 times of a class, and people pick and choose, and they go to different classes, and they pay a token $10. The rabbis don't get anything from it, but it's a fundraiser for the Federation. And so people come to this, and I was leaving that, and I stayed and talked to a couple people, so I was one of the last people leaving. Not uncommon for me. But as I walked out, it had snowed and sleeted in Tucson, which of course it does.
Yeah, very, very few
every
times.
once in a while it'll do.
Yeah.
And I come out, and there's garbage caked on my car. Not garbage, but snow and ice.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm walking to the car, and I'm looking at this, and I'm like, I don't have a scraper.
Sure.
Because my scraper is in Ohio. And I actually left my car in Ohio, and I gave the scraper away with the car because I wasn't going to need it. And as I'm walking to the car and looking at this, and I did what you do up north when you run into the problem, which is you use a credit card. You just have to reach over a lot
I've done
more.
that too. Yeah.
Credit cards work really well for that. And so as I'm fumbling in my purse looking for the credit card, one of the Federation workers looks over at me and says, "You thought you left this behind, didn't you?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I really did." Welcome to Tucson. The good news is that sometime during the next day it's gone. It doesn't, except on the mountains, it doesn't last.
Well, folks, if you're Florida natives and you have no idea what she's talking about, it's kind of like a windshield wiper, except it's a little bit sharper.
Yeah.
And you
scrape the ice.
Scrape the ice off your windshield.
And sometimes you bang on it and hope you don't bang through the window.
Oh, boy. Yeah.
And sometimes you have to use it on your door latch because the doors freeze, too.
Well, and Carol learned the hard way in Boston.
The door locks freeze.
-8, and her door froze.
Yeah. We used to have graphite that you'd spray in there to keep the locks functioning.
One of the engineers at WBZ came out and sprayed this magic stuff, and she could drive home.
Yeah. It's those are wonderful things. Yeah, South Floridians have no idea. But Tucson does get snow. It doesn't last in the city or on the flatlands. But it's gorgeous up in Mount Lemmon. And Mount Lemmon on the outskirts of Tucson has a triple diamond ski course. So, folks, it can get pretty treacherous up in the mountains. But those are called desert islands. They are mesas. They're tableaus that you just go straight up the mountain. And it's quite beautiful up there. Beautiful trees. We used to go up there to get pieces of fall and to see the snow. Sometimes you need chains to get up on Mount Lemmon. And
there were some shots that the University of Arizona took at the Kidd Observatory in the snow. And that was so beautiful. So beautiful.
Kidd Observatory is definitely, if anybody's even vaguely considering a trip to Tucson, the Kidd Observatory, put that on your list. Plan it ahead because you've got to make the reservations well in advance. They sell out quickly. They'll only take so many people up the mountain on any given night. But go up for a night view. Yeah,
it's a
absolutely.
Must. Yeah.
There are few places in the U.S. where you can see stars like you can see them on Kidd Peak. There are a few places in the mountains between Harrisburg and Pittsburgh where you're isolated enough from light pollution that you can see incredible skies.
Really?
I have seen the Milky Way I've seen it on a flight between Harrisburg and Pittsburgh.
Really?
Yeah, I was actually, that also was with my husband. We were flying cross country from Harrisburg back. We had done the pilot thing of dinner in Harrisburg. And it was late at night. He needed some night hours. And so we went and had dinner, and you wait for the sky to get dark, and then you fly back. And the stars were star-glorious. Star-glorious.
We used to have an anchorman at Channel 5 in Los Angeles, and Hal Fishman, God love him, was a tremendous pilot. And he would, to get his hours, he'd say, let's go to dinner in Santa Barbara. And I'd say, wait a minute, it's 100 miles away. He said, it's 20 minutes by plane.
Yeah.
So, and we'd take off from Santa Monica and be back by 9 o'clock to write the news at night. Oh, man. Yeah.
Yeah. So those are things that you need. You need the night hours. So and a lot of restaurants are wonderful in airports, or at least they used to be. I have no idea what COVID has done to those and that set of operations.
So if you're a pilot, do you need to keep those hours up? You do.
Yeah. So that's why you planned things like that.
Okay.
Because just going up and tooling around gets old after a while. It's much more fun to go somewhere with some kind of a reason, and dinner or lunch or breakfast are perfectly good ideas. And so something like your night flight to Santa Barbara, you come down and you look at the city at night, and it's pretty, and you look at the mountains, and you look at this, and you look at that. Just don't look too closely.
Yeah, really.
Yeah. So cities are very beautiful at night. Yeah. Actually, I can remember the night sky when I came home from Israel the first time that I had spent some time there. And I came back to the U.S. in December. So all the cities were bright lights with all of the winter light going on. And it was very beautiful to fly into New York and see all that light.
I'll bet that would be spectacular.
So,
yeah.
But that was in a commercial airplane, because we'd just come across the pond, the ocean.
The pond.
The pond.
Well, there. Did you see the new rocket plane? I can't think of the builder, but New York to London in 45 minutes.
Yeah. Those kinds of things will change. It's stuff like that makes travel possible when we can now Zoom so much more easily.
Yeah.
And so many more conferences or teleconferences.
Well, and what's intriguing is supposedly is it Los Angeles to Tokyo in like 2 hours or some ridiculous number, and then Beijing likewise, and it's like, wow, you talk about jet flight changing the world as it did. This is gonna make the world much smaller.
Yeah.
If it isn't the same
works.
as the old SST mess.
Yes, issues. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of issues.
So we'll see. I do believe that we're going to be in driverless cars before long. I believe that we're going to be in many different advances in technology. We're not going to recognize the world in 20 years. Look at how much it's changed in the last 20 years.
Well, we at the last broadcasters convention that we went to, which was 2019, one of the VPs of Ford was saying our target date is 2030. So you radio folks better adapt to what the new dashboards are going to look like in 2030.
Yeah.
And the video board that they had was like a 13-inch television.
Yeah.
In the dashboard. It's like,
well, they look like video games now.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Back when the dinosaurs roamed in the backyard and the airplanes that I flew then. So how's that for a great image? Airplanes and dinosaurs.
That's it.
But the airplanes that were coming out then, the new avionics, looked like video games, and they really look like video games now. I've peeked inside some of the aircraft that I've flown on commercially, and the changes on the panels And those are mostly retrofits, because a lot of those aircraft are very old.
Nat Geo had a feature on U.S. Air Force pilots in Palmdale flying the war, and they're drone pilots.
Yeah.
And it's like, wait a minute. And you look at the controls, it does look like they're playing a video game, but then you realize that these things are really flying.
Yeah, it's not a video game. It's very real.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Very real. And, so that's going to be an interesting challenge for future children, to be able to distinguish what's real versus what's a game or a movie or a video. I think those lines are going to get harder and harder to discern.
As if they aren't now?
As if they aren't now. Yeah, exactly. They obviously are very, very hard right now, but they'll get even harder.
Wow.
So those are some of the challenges. It's one of the things that I tell my students about, is to be careful that you don't raise screen kids. Screen kids are kids that play games mostly on their tablets or phones, and they don't develop 3D eye-hand coordination, because they're not building blocks, they're not doing Legos, they're not doing American logs or American bricks, or I did American brick, so.
Yeah, our grandson was a big Lego guy, and now he's an engineering student in Eastern Washington. Go figure.
And that's probably part of where my engineering fascination came with.
Yeah.
Or that, or Tinker Toys, or any of those kinds of manual. You've got to move something and do something, and you've got to do something with your two hands, and you have to learn to bring them together correctly. That's a 3D learning that screens do not give students.
It's only 2D.
It's only 2D. And even though, just like playing the golf game on your phone does not make you a better golfer. It just doesn't. It's fun, and if you're into golf, it's probably a very fun game to play. But, and that's a big but, it does not teach you how to do the drive. It does not teach you how to pick the correct iron. It might give you some rules that you'll memorize, but it's not going to give you the feel in your hands. And that heuristic knowledge, it's called heuristic knowledge, the knowledge that's just ingrained from the experience, is a totally different kind of knowledge. A different kind of memory, a different set of learning. And it's very, very important. Another place where I used to use that, my crazy past lives, when I worked as a tire engineer at Goodyear, and I designed tires. And you might say, what is it, just the tread? No, not the tread. Seldom the tread pattern, certainly not in aircraft tires. But there are many, many, many components in a tire.
See, I can't even comprehend something like that.
There's your radial ply or plies.
Yeah.
And there's the bead, and then there's the support for the bead, and there's the kind of wires in the bead, and the kind of how you put rubber in and around everything, and then the wedges and the belt. There's many, many components in a tire. And when I used to, you could sit on the CAD machine, the drafting machine, and draw the things and ask it to. There were certain programs that it would do to say, okay, to get this shape in the cured tire and the finished tire, you need this kind of something. And it would suggest a few different shapes for that component to be when it was in the raw rubber, in the green rubber, as opposed to the cured rubber from the finished tire. And I used to go down with those and ask the tire builders what shape worked better. Because the tire builders knew more in their hands on how the tire went together, so that you didn't get unwanted air pockets, you didn't have to do extra fidgeting with the part. It slid in, and it slid in correctly to where it needed to be, and was just easier on the tire builder or the tire machine to build the tire. It's called building a tire. And
wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
You may not think about that,
No.
but it's really important. And that kind of knowledge frequently went into how I designed the parts, the components of the tire, the green tire.
That's amazing. Wow.
And those things are important because you go and you balance your wheel. Well, you want your tire balanced also. So you want the splices to be a certain way. You want the pieces not to bunch up inside. There's a lot of things to be aware of between how the builder applies it. And I'm sure that now it's become much more mechanized, just as everything in manufacturing has become mechanized. And but even so, you still need the pieces to go together easily and smoothly to build the most uniform tire.
So did you at least steal a ride in the Goodyear blimp when you were there?
No, employees, it's very hard to get one of those.
Oh, I love those things.
You would have had an easy chance because you are in the.
We had the Goodyear.
You had the press pass.
Yeah, we had the Goodyear blimp with us at the America's Cup in Newport, Rhode Island. I was in for several days, and wow.
Yeah.
Those pilots they've got the huge wheel, and I don't know how they do what they do, but it's amazing.
Slowly.
Oh, well, yeah, it's very slow. But, yeah, it's truly amazing.
Although it's not slow in the cockpit. They're working furiously.
Yeah, they are. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But the craft is just going, yeah. The problem with that is you've really got to plan ahead because it, even more than a ship, is just kind of floating in the air, and you suggest to it to do things.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, our cameraman just was phenomenal, and he had been working with the Goodyear people for a long time. And I mean, he was telling me, he said, Greg, I don't even have to tell the pilot what I'm shooting because he knows.
Yeah.
And they knew each other so well.
Yeah.
And it was,
Yeah.
it was hand in glove.
Yeah. Yeah, those kinds of things are wonderful when they happen, that kind of partnership.
Yeah.
So employees, not so much the blimp, but customers and certainly the press, much easier to get. And cameramen, of course, would go up in it quite often.
Sure.
Because that's what the blimp is there for. It's to help build that PR.
Sure. You talk about your students. Do they have phones in your classroom, or do they check them somewhere?
They're not supposed to be on the phones, and that's a constant, it says it in the syllabus, which is the teacher's contract with the student. Thou shalt not use your phone or tablet or computer for anything other than class. And most people don't take notes on their phone. They might take a short note, but they're not going to take class notes on a phone. And most of them don't take notes on the laptops either. Although occasionally one will.
Okay.
And
at least you got one.
Yeah, the part that I love about that is it says it in the syllabus, and it says, this is your first warning. So if I have to say it to you in class, that's already number 2. So, 3 and you're out. So be aware. And I cruise the classroom, even now with the COVID concerns. I cruise the classroom, and, to the folks, if any of you, my students, are listening, if you're sitting in the back 3 rows with the laptop open, I'm definitely going to come and cruise. And, everybody's human, and I understand the temptation and the draw. And yes, I will agree that I can be boring. I have no problem admitting that. Certainly not when the class goes over an hour. The teacher can be boring. Anything can become boring. But. And I did that. One student, it's many years ago now. And you can tell that because the game that the student was playing was Floppy Birds. That's not even out anymore. But I was cruising the classroom, and I noticed that she was playing Floppy Bird on her laptop. And I went and stood behind her. And her friends are desperately trying to, let her know that the prof is behind you. And, of course, they don't want to get in trouble with me. So they're trying to that was fun to watch. How they were trying to clue her that I was there. And eventually she realized that class got awful quiet. Oh, and the prof's not up at the front. And that's when she turned around and saw me looking over her shoulder.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
So did you play the game with her?
No.
Oh.
No. And she didn't do it again. She actually came and apologized at the beginning of the next class. So I'll
Wow.
give her some credit.
Okay, yeah.
And, I think she learned a lesson. Because it is a temptation. And, if you're doing especially one of the games that's like Words with Friends or any of the interactive with your friends, and the phone dings you or the tablet dings you to tell you, you're blah, blah, then that is a temptation. But part of life is learning to not give in to every temptation and to stay with the task at hand. So, yeah. Sometimes if it really gets bad, I make a rule that those with computers have to sit in the front 2 rows. That usually gets the computers put away. Because in reality, they'd much rather stay back there. And the other one that I love is that, they don't realize that you can tell when they're using their phone. And one of the things that I'll tell them, if you're looking down at your crotch and you're smiling, I've got a pretty good suspicion that you're on a phone. Because most people do not look down at their laps and smile.
Oh.
At least not in class.
Oh,
But
my.
it's true. They don't see what you see.
Yeah.
Right? And from the front of the room, you can see under the tables that they're sitting at. So depending on where they are in the room and the further back they are, the easier it is to see. Now you can see, you can see this finger motion of texting or playing a game. And
Sure.
if they're engrossed on something other than you or their paper, and very few of them actually have paper out anymore. There's just not anywhere near the notebooks out for notes. Some students still do it, but most don't.
Really?
Yeah. Some of them will have their computers up and they'll take notes, but I think most other professors anymore supply the students with the PDF, a file of the slides that you use for the lectures.
Oh, PDF of those?
Yeah, a PDF of those or a PowerPoint of those.
Okay.
So that they actually have.
Oh, that's cool.
And the reason that I do that is that way they can be more interactive in class and not as worried about getting the notes down. Those people who learn by writing still write notes, and those are the kids that'll have the notebooks. But it's not everybody; it's very few.
See, that would have to be me.
And there are learners that learn by writing.
Yeah, that.
And for those, and that's I think one of the big changes in academia in more recent decades is that we recognize that students are very, very different in their learning styles. If you've got 30 students, you probably have 30 different learning styles. Because some people learn by seeing, some people learn by hearing, some people learn best by watching a video, some people need to move, some people need to fidget with something. It's just all different kinds of ways that people learn. Some people learn better by discussion groups. So one of the things that I'll sometimes do, depending on the size of the class, is break them up into smaller discussion groups so that they can discuss a subject.
See, that's what I would like. I don't.
Yeah.
I'm not a video guy. I just wouldn't get into that.
Oh, you'd be surprised. Some of the videos are really good.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
some of them are really, and most of the videos that I use are in the 3 to 6 minute range, so they're not long.
Okay.
And sometimes, actually fairly often, I will play them to the class at a little bit faster than 1, because most people go out of their way to say what they're going to say slowly, and you can actually speed it up quite a bit and still get the message.
Okay.
It's just, some people hear faster, some people speak faster, some people speak very slowly. And we teach people to speak slowly when you're being broadcast,
Yes.
right?
Intentionally.
Speak
yes.
and enunciate clearly. And so those same principles go onto the videos, but you don't always need it, depending on the subject matter. Particularly if for example, you're showing somebody, let's say how to propagate African violets. Really what most people need is to see what you're doing, not hear you talk about violets.
Right.
So, yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, I remember our old vocal coach in San Diego. She was marvelous, and she would have us doing exercises before we'd anchor shows and stuff, and they worked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They do. They absolutely do. So those are some of the different things. And that's one of the challenges for educators today, is how to involve all these different kinds of learning styles. And that's true whether it's at a college level, at a high school, at an elementary, or at religious school. We do different kinds of teaching and learning. And Sharon from Tucson, who's frequently on my Facebook and giving me messages, is actually subbing at a Montessori school today. So she can't hop on and tell me all about the Montessori, because Montessori is a very tactile and project-based learning system. So students take projects out of the cubby holes and do them and get credit for completing them, and that's how they work through. And it's there's a lot more activity in a Montessori because the students are all doing different things. And the teacher hops around and interacts with all the different groups. Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard so much about Montessori, and it's all good. I mean,
yeah, it is the pluses to it is that it's very individual. Students learn according to their own style. The hard part about it is that you've got to have smaller classrooms because you've got a teacher working through all of this, and yeah. And I think that when I think back to the early education that I had in California, the years that we lived in California, California had a very different school approach than a lot of places have. I was in multiple grades, like first, second, and third were together. And you worked, if you, like, your reading was at level 1 and your math was 2 and something else was 3, you worked with different groups on the different subjects so that you were challenged at whatever level you were at.
It almost sounds like that could be a college setup.
In some ways it is, and in some ways it wasn't. It definitely was a lower.
Right, but
but a lot of activities that you do in school really are self-paced. I can remember SRA, the reading program, and that was you pulled a card out, you read it, you answered the questions, and everybody did that independently, and you just worked your way through the box. And then you when you hit a certain point, you connected with the teacher and back and forth. But I'm dealing with really early memories from that.
Wow, cards.
Yeah.
What are those?
Yeah, now it would be on a screen probably. Probably is.
It would have to be.
Yeah. It's easy that way. So, yeah.
Well, thinking back to what you were talking about, that you created PowerPoints or PDFs for the kids, that's a lot on your plate then, that in the preps.
It always is.
Classes.
It is. And that's the hard part for an adjunct, because you get paid for the class, but you spend an awful lot of time outside of class, prepping and doing things like that. And I just did an intensive feedback to my Kaiser students, but I've got 10, 12 students in a class, so you can spend more time. But I took one of their assignments and I actually went through every single line of it and edited it and corrected it and gave it back to them with explanations and why I did what I did and what options they have, what choices they have. And each student took somewhere between an hour to 2 hours to do that feedback. So now if you take that to the bigger classes, that becomes a lot more.
Oh, yeah.
Lot more challenging. And of course, it depends also on the assignment. This was a page and a half assignment, so it wasn't that long. And when I do a 5 to 7 page paper, no, I can't do a full edit on it. I can tweak and do parts and say, this kind of mistake, and you do it all through the rest of the paper. Please correct in the future.
Mm-hmm.
So there are challenges, but yes, teachers spend a big chunk of the time, and that's true of public school teachers, college instructors, professors. It doesn't matter where in the spectrum of education you are. A lot of teacher time, instructor time, professor time is outside the classroom. It's grading, it's preparing, it's planning, it's all of those things. And there's a trade-off. So one of the things that a number of schools are doing now is something called QM. They're standardizing the class, particularly for online classes. And the goal is noble. The goal is to make it easier for online students to find what they're looking for, to have the flow of the class make sense. There's two big downsides to that. One is, and it sounds like it should be a positive, standardizing the curriculum so that all of the sections of that class teach the same thing. And that's good if and only if the professor or teacher can add extra things to tune to the students. If they don't do that and they just teach what's there, then it's a flatter class.
Mm-hmm. I get it.
Because just as each student learns differently, each teacher teaches differently. Each teacher has different strengths, things that they can bring in or not bring in to the class. And every teacher impacts students differently. And. So it becomes this interesting challenge of how do I design the class using my strengths to best suit the needs of the students.
I remember back, and this is 65, 66, when at Channel 5 in LA, we hired this young college professor, Dick Enberg, and Richard was talking about his teaching experiences as a professor at San Fernando Valley State, and it was very much like his broadcasting when he started doing sporting events. He would say 3 to 4 hours of prep for every hour of class. And just like when he started doing NBC Sports, it's 3 to 4 hours of prep for every hour on the air. And, and you think, wow, this is amazing. But he just carried that over from
his teaching,
his prof days to his broadcasting days.
It's people have no idea. Before every class, I reread that chapter in the textbook, so I know what they've read. Plus, I've scanned. If I use 3 videos in the class, not uncommon for an hour to 2 hour classroom, that I'll use 2 or 3 videos. I've probably looked at 20 to pick the 2 or 3.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Because I need to make sure that it's a good video, and B, that it's teaching the topic that I want to include. Because sometimes, no, YouTube's never do that, right? Have clickbait. Show you one thing at the beginning and then they go off somewhere else. And the other thing that I have to check for actually is the scholarship in the video. Because just because you make a YouTube video doesn't mean you know what you're talking about.
Sure.
And if it's cute and funny, then a lot of people will watch it, but it might not have the message.
Okay. Yeah.
So, especially now with all of the monetizing going on, there's a lot more game playing happening in the videos. So, yeah.
Wow.
Lots of time goes in, and a big chunk of it's figuring out how and what and where do I put things and how do I segment it and how do I piece it. And the two schools are very different in their philosophy and in their style of teaching. Because IRSC, the classes are, an hour and some minutes to 2.5 hours, depending on how often the class meets, whether it's in person or hybrid. There's all kinds of questions.
Sure.
And that doesn't even begin to get to the folks that are just online, because you still have to do lectures and videos for those classes.
Separately?
Yeah, because you're referencing different things.
Whoa.
Yeah. So it's not like you can record the class and then just give it to the online students. You've got to explain more of the shell to them. You've got to show them how and where to find things, because they're not in class. They can't ask the questions.
Yeah.
So, yeah. It's much more complicated. It's like everything else. People think that all you do is walk out and call the shots at a game.
No. Not if you do it right.
Not if you do it right. There's a lot of prep work. And, yes, the more often I teach a given class in a different setting, then I will keep track of things like what videos I used and things like that. So I don't have to do quite as much hunting each time. But I still have to check and make sure that the video I want to use is still out there. I've got that going on right now in one of my classes. 2 of the videos I love using, they're no longer there.
Ooh.
They've been pulled down for one reason or another, and they get pulled down for a variety of reasons. Sometimes the person terminates their account, and their videos go bye-bye. Other times somebody challenges something in the video, and it goes bye-bye. Because I happen to like to use...
We're not saying censorship at all, are we?
No, it's not a censorship. It's a copyright issue.
Okay.
Because video makers will sometimes use clips out of TV shows or movies.
No, then it's a copyright issue.
Then it's a copyright issue, because
you bet.
if they're not making the right notations or getting the right permissions, then they can't just put a clip of a video out, no matter how well it illustrates the point you're trying to make. So, for example, I was just teaching about operant conditioning, and there's a great scene several scenes out of Big Bang Theory, where I can't think of the tall guy. It's Leonard and
it's the star.
the star.
One of the
and he's giving chocolates to Leonard's girlfriend to shape her behavior. And it goes well. And at one point he I can't think of his name. Okay, somebody, it's time to call in and tell me the name. Or put it here on Facebook. Something.
Help.
Sheldon. Somebody did it. Thank you.
Thank
you, Al. Sheldon is doing that, and he's trying to shape behavior, and he's using chocolate in a spray bottle. And it's a very funny scene, but it also does show operant conditioning. And so it's a great illustration to how do people use operant conditioning, because we use operant conditioning all the time. We reward behaviors that we like, and we punish behaviors we don't like.
Mm-hmm.
Now, people often use positive and negative incorrectly on both punishment and on reward. So I'm going to slip into psychology mode and say positive reinforcement is something you give somebody to encourage a behavior, like chocolate, wages, an A, a star, whatever it is that you give somebody. And you don't give an A, but you award the points for the score that the student has earned, and that's a form of reward. When your parents say, if you do that, we'll go to Disney. If you clean up your room, we'll go to Disney. That's a positive reward. A negative reward is when you put your seatbelt on in your car, it stops beeping. So a negative reward is something that encourages behavior by removing something that the subject doesn't like.
Mm-hmm.
Gets rid of the beeping. I will stop nagging you when you clean your room. That's a positive reward. Okay, a positive punishment, I will hit you, right? That's a positive punishment if you do this. I will, if you take something away, so I will take away your phone or your privileges, that's negative punishment. Positive is giving, negative is taking away. Yeah, Al just pointed out compliments are positive reinforcement. Very powerful one. Right? Snide remarks are a negative punishment.
Mm-hmm.
So everything's got a positive and a negative. Rewards encourage behavior, punishments discourage. Positive you give, negative you take away. There's all kinds of things like that. And that's just the terminology, but we use it all the time. Your paycheck is a positive reward for doing your job.
Paycheck?
Yeah.
I've heard of those.
Yeah. That's because you're the owner.
No, I work for the owner.
I hear you.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, people don't realize that when you own a business, you become a slave to it.
Yes.
You really do.
I know.
And that was interesting. So there's an example of a video that I rejected and one that I didn't reject that said, we have to teach our students to be employable. And that particular video that I showed that said that, I stopped the video at that point and I said, so are we looking just for people to be employable? Or are we also looking for people to be entrepreneurs?
Oh, nice.
So there's an important point of that.
Oh,
because
yeah.
the object of education can be to make people employees only. And we need employees, and employees are good, and you can earn a decent wage as an employee depending on what you do. But the country needs entrepreneurs as well.
In a big way.
In a very big way. We've actually almost gone a little too far in the other direction. And so it's not just about getting the good job. It also needs to be able to garner the skills to be able to run your own company. And those are different skill sets and different personality types. And so the question, just like learning styles are different, no two individual humans are identical ever, she said. So that's been a lot about work, and there's the music, and that tells me that it's time to take that break from work. And after I leave here, it will soon be Shabbat. We've got services at 7:30 tonight at Congregation Eitz Chayim, your Jewish home on the Treasure Coast. We've got a plant sale on the 4th Sunday and the Monday after it, and we've got our catered dinner on the 3rd Friday. Lots of things coming up, even in this Cheshvan month of not much happening. So, a Shabbat Shalom to everyone, and God willing, I will be here next week at 11:05 on WPSL. This is Rabbi Shafir Lobb for Ask a Rabbi.
You've been listening to Ask a Rabbi right here on WPSL, Port St. Lucie, talking the Treasure Coast, webcaster to the world.